Have you ever noticed how some people seem to hold an almost uncanny influence over their surroundings, without ever raising their voice? They don't shout, they don't plead, they simply step back, and suddenly everything shifts. The energy changes. People begin to question, to chase, to feel the absence. Now imagine if you did the same. What if you stopped reacting to everything right away? What if you chose silence over impulsive replies, calm withdrawal over emotional outbursts? That's where the real power lies. When you stop making yourself constantly available, emotionally, physically, psychologically, the world around you feels it. People become unsettled because they're used to guiding your behavior through your reactions, your impulses, your predictability. But the moment you pull back, the game changes. Those who thought they understood you are forced to confront just how little they actually know. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." So, ask yourself, when you become unavailable, who panics? Who gets angry? Who pushes your buttons just to get a rise out of you? Their reactions say far more about them than about you. And they expose just how much power over you you've given away, often without even realizing it. You keep offering pieces of yourself just to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to hold on to people who, truthfully, were never truly with you. And with every forced yes, with every instant replay, every time you react emotionally, you're giving away a piece of your energy. And by the end of the day, what remains? Exhaustion, frustration, and emptiness you can't quite explain. But let me tell you why. Because you're offering too much of yourself to people who don't even deserve a moment of your silence. This isn't about turning your back on the world. It's about choosing yourself. It's about stepping into what Carl Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming whole, authentic, and fully yourself. And that journey begins when you realize that silence can speak louder than 1,000 arguments, and that withdrawal, when it stems from clarity, not avoidance, is an act of strength. So now, let me ask you, genuinely, how long will you let others control you through your emotions? How long will you dance like a puppet every time someone presses on an old wound? Maybe it's time to cut the strings, to retreat, to become a mystery. Because the moment you stop being available, the entire dynamic changes. You were taught to always show up, to respond quickly, to say yes, even when your soul screamed no. Since childhood, you've been conditioned to believe your value lies in how much of yourself you give to others. But here's a truth few dare to say out loud. This constant availability isn't a virtue. It's a cage. As long as you believe you must always be accessible, emotionally, mentally, physically, you will be drained, used, and forgotten the moment you're no longer useful. Do you know why? Because being constantly available makes you predictable. And what is predictable becomes a tool. People start using you as their emotional escape button. They press when they need attention, comfort, validation, and then set you aside until next time. But you don't see it. Because you're trapped in the illusion that being there for everyone will eventually make someone show up for you. But it doesn't work like that. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, loved, validated. And it's that very mask that makes you too available. You say it's fine when you're suffocating. You reply instantly, even when you're completely drained. You explain, justify, defend, like you owe the world a piece of yourself. But here's the truth. The more you make yourself the center of everyone else's story, the more you vanish from your own. Being always available is not love. It's not kindness. It's a quiet, constant form of self-abandonment. This constant availability, it's often a hidden plea for approval, a shield against rejection, an attempt to control how others perceive you. But that control has a cost. The price you pay is your peace, your vitality, your energy, poured out as if it were endless, when in truth, It's not. It's finite. Precious. The people who expect you to always be there, to respond, to engage, they don't necessarily want you. They want what you give. Validation, companionship, distraction, emotional ease. But when you begin to shift, when you draw boundaries, when you stop reacting, they feel the loss. They don't miss you. They miss the function you serve. Suddenly, you're different. They say you're cold, distant, strange. Not because you've truly changed, but because you've stopped being convenient. And here's the harshest truth of all. The more available you are, the less you are valued. What is too abundant becomes disposable. What is always present becomes background noise. No one treasures what is handed to them freely. No one respects what they never had to earn. So now ask yourself, who actually deserves your time? Who is worthy of your attention, your presence, your listening? Or better yet, who deserves your absence? But before you answer that, we need to go deeper. Why do we react so quickly? Why do we give in so easily? What drives this constant urge to respond, to justify, to please? The answer lies in something Carl Jung called psychic energy. And that's where our real understanding begins. Because your energy is everything. And if you don't learn to protect it, someone will always find a way to use it against you. If this resonates with you, take a moment to support the channel. Click subscribe. It means more than you know. Carl Jung didn't see the human mind as a mechanical system reacting blindly to the world. He saw it as an energy field, a living, breathing source of force. Every thought you think, every feeling you feel, every choice you make consumes that force. So here's the question. Are you deciding where your energy goes? Or are you letting the world decide for you? Every time you react without thinking, you lose a little more. When you defend yourself against criticism that didn't deserve a response, when you argue to prove a point no one asked for, when you explain yourself to people who never truly listened, when you try to please those who never saw your worth, you are leaking energy. Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And he was right. The more you react, the more entangled you become. And those who feel constantly drained aren't weak. They are simply too open, too exposed, spending their strength on what never gives anything back. They're not weak. They're misdirected. And do you know what happens to someone who lives in a constant state of exhaustion? They become vulnerable. And vulnerability, when unmanaged, makes you easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, emotionally needy people can sense this. They notice that you don't know how to guard your energy, that you react to everything, that you're constantly trying to fix, to help, to rescue, and they exploit it. Carl Jung said that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to conserve and contain energy within itself. That means learning how to say no without guilt, staying silent without feeling cowardly, observing before acting, because true power isn't in the reaction. It's in the choice, the ability to respond with intention, not impulse. And that choice only comes when you know yourself deeply enough to recognize your own patterns. Think about it. How many nights have you lost sleep, replaying a conversation that never found closure? How many hours have you spent obsessing over what you could have said, or why someone treated you the way they did? That's your energy, leaking, feeding ghosts that should have died long ago, sustaining dynamics that only exist because you keep showing up to them. Psychic energy, Jung taught, is like a force field. When it's well protected, it gives you presence. You walk into a room and people sense it. You don't need to say a word. But when it's misused, you become reactive. You become fragile. And the world has no mercy for those who bleed energy into every interaction. So begin observing your triggers. What makes you lash out? What makes you shrink, explain, justify? Those moments, those reflexes, are exactly where your power escapes. And that is where your work begins. Not to become cold, not to disconnect, but to become selective, to be the sovereign authority over your inner world. Now here's one of Jung's most profound insights. When you learn to protect your energy, you shatter the projections others place upon you. And that makes people deeply uncomfortable. Because now we enter the realm of silent manipulation. In the next part, we'll explore how opportunistic people feed off your energy, and why your unavailability renders their control useless. Get ready to stare into the eyes of those who have drained you without you ever realizing it. You think you're in control. You think your emotions are conscious choices. But the truth is more unsettling. Most of your emotional reactions are programmed. And those who understand this, they don't need to yell. They don't need to force anything. They just press the buttons you've left exposed. And you respond. Always. Carl Jung called this projection, the process where people project parts of themselves they cannot face onto others. But there's a side of projection that often goes unnoticed. You don't just receive projections. You become the canvas they're painted on. And the more emotionally available you are, the more blank your canvas becomes. That friend who only calls when they're in crisis. That partner who expects you to fix everything. That person who praises you, but only when you're useful. They're not connecting with you. They're engaging with the idea of you, the role you agreed to play. And why did you agree? Because you were afraid. Afraid of disappointing. Afraid of being unloved. Afraid of abandonment. The most effective manipulation doesn't shout. It whispers in guilt. In that quiet voice that says, you owe them. You have to be there. You can't let them down, even when it destroys you inside. And here's the core truth. The manipulator doesn't need to dominate you. They just need you to keep reacting the same way. But the moment you break that pattern, the moment you say no, choose silence, withdraw, instead of explaining yourself, the illusion shatters. The mask they placed on you slips. And suddenly, they're lost, because they no longer know who they're dealing with. And worse, now they are forced to face themselves. And not everyone is ready for that. Your unavailability becomes a threat, because it exposes the emptiness they've been avoiding. The silence you offer doesn't comfort them. It echoes. It reveals the noise inside them that they never wanted to confront. And so, they strike. With criticism. With guilt. With emotional theatrics. Not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer functioning as their convenient mirror. Carl Jung once said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, their shadow surfaces. And for those who've always used you as an escape, that shadow is unbearable. But what about you? Are you ready to handle the discomfort of being misunderstood, of being judged, rejected, maybe even attacked simply for protecting yourself? Are you ready for the silence that follows rupture? Because in that silence, a new kind of power is born. And that's what we'll explore next. In a world obsessed with noise, silence is rebellion. Everyone wants to speak, to be heard, to respond faster, louder, smarter, to win arguments that don't matter, even if it costs them their peace. But there's a power almost no one talks about. And even fewer know how to wield. The power of silence. Not the silence of fear or passivity, but the silence that is conscious, strategic, brutally lucid. A silence that is not absence, but presence, amplified. Jung didn't see silence as emptiness. He saw it as the soil where transformation begins. Because when you stop reacting, you start observing. And when you observe long enough, you begin to see the hidden patterns, the emotional loops, the manipulation games, the cycles of self-betrayal. Silence brings clarity, and clarity is dangerous, especially for those who thrive by keeping you blind. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond? When you don't explain? When you disappear? It's not because they miss you. It's because your silence disrupts their control. As long as you're speaking, you're still in the game. But when you go silent, you change the rules, and that terrifies them. Because true silence isn't about saying nothing. It's about owning your energy. refusing to be pulled into emotional chaos, choosing not to fight battles that aren't worth your soul. This is where individuation begins. What Jung called the process of becoming whole, of becoming truly yourself. And it requires space. It requires quiet. It requires the sacred distance where finally you can hear your own voice without the world's interference. But don't be fooled. Silence has a cost. It will distance you from those who only valued the role you played, not the person you are. It will make you seem cold, distant, even arrogant, to people who never looked beyond their own projections of you. But here's the truth, that discomfort is not about you. It's their reaction to losing control over a version of you that was never real to begin with. Because silence strips away illusions, and some people were never with you. They were with your function. As you mature, you become selective with your words, because you realize every sentence is an investment of energy, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes, silence isn't withdrawal. It's sovereignty. It's the language of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Silence makes others uncomfortable, because it reflects their own internal noise. It doesn't attack, but it exposes. And that exposure reveals more than any argument ever could. You don't have to explain your absence. It explains itself, and those who feel threatened by it only show how much they depended on your imbalance to maintain their own control. But the most powerful silence is not the one that unsettles others. It's the silence that rebuilds you, that reconnects you with something deeper than approval or applause. In that quiet space, free from noise and need, you begin to reclaim your energy, to remember who you are, and that is where the real transformation begins. Because it's not enough to shut out the noise of the world. You must learn to use your energy consciously, to decide where it flows, where it stays, and most importantly, where it should never be spent again. This is the art of being selective with your soul. If you're on this path of reclaiming your energy, setting boundaries, and reconnecting with who you really are, you'll find deep value in my book, Beyond the Shadow. It unpacks Jung's most vital insights and offers tools to protect your energy, set boundaries, and return to your true self. You'll find the link in the pinned comment. But let me be clear, insight means nothing without action. If you keep saying yes when you mean no, keep responding to messages that drain you, keep showing up for relationships that exist out of habit, then all of this awareness becomes just another form of self-deception. Real change begins when you choose to become selective. And that takes emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability isn't coldness. It isn't arrogance. It's not indifference. It's self-respect. It's deciding you will no longer be emotionally accessible to everyone, at every moment, for any reason. It's reclaiming control over your energy, your time, and your peace. And it starts with small, powerful choices. Not responding right away. Taking a breath before you react. Leaving the room before being pulled into chaos. Turning off your phone without guilt. Saying not today. Saying I'm not interested. Saying I won't get involved. Because your energy is sacred. And now, you finally know how to protect it. But here's the most important part. You don't need to justify your absence. You don't need to explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. And for many, that is unforgivable. Because when you stop explaining, you take away their power. The power to keep you locked in a role. The helpful one. The understanding one. The endlessly available one. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that every process of individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, passes through isolation. But not a depressive isolation. A sacred one, a time of inner retreat, a space where you learn to hear your own voice again, unfiltered by noise, uncontaminated by the expectations of others, where you begin to rebuild your identity, not by how others see you, but from your own center. Want to know a powerful test for your evolution? Observe. Observe who begins to distance themselves when you become more reserved. Observe who tries to provoke you when you no longer react. Observe who accuses you of changing when you finally start protecting yourself. These are not signs that you're doing something wrong. They are proof that you are finally becoming free. Yes, being unavailable is uncomfortable at first. You'll feel guilty. You'll wonder if you're being selfish. You'll be told you're too harsh. But that discomfort, it's part of the deconstruction process. You have spent a lifetime being conditioned to place yourself second. Of course, change feels unfamiliar. Of course, it causes discomfort in you and in everyone who benefited from your former self-sacrifice. But here's the truth. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. Every time you say no to the world, you are saying yes to yourself. Every time you walk away from a toxic environment, you're affirming that your peace is worth more than a false connection. And every time you stop explaining yourself, you begin to be respected, even if only by a few. But understand this, not everyone is ready for this version of you, because your emotional absence exposes what they've tried to hide, how much they depended on your chaos to feel in control, and that's when the rupture comes. With it comes the pain, the loneliness, the estrangement, that aching feeling that you are losing something, when in truth, you're just beginning to free yourself. But then, what comes next? What happens after the distance? What is born from the silence? That's what we'll explore in the final part. The rebirth that only arrives when you've had the courage to be misunderstood, the strength to stand alone, and the wisdom to become whole on your own. Because now, it's time to understand why the loneliness of the strong is the path to true freedom. But gradually, this silence transforms. It begins to cleanse, to calm, to heal, and then comes solitude. But not the solitude of absence. No, it is the solitude of total presence. Your own, the solitude of the strong. The solitude of someone who no longer betrays themselves, just to keep others close. And in that sacred space, where there was once confusion, clarity enters. Where there was once anxiety, peace enters. Where there was once neediness, a new kind of strength is born, the strength of being whole within yourself. Carl Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires stepping away from the collective. It demands that you disidentify from the mask, that you walk alone for a while. And that is exactly what you're doing. When you choose to become unavailable, you are not fleeing the world. You are returning to yourself. It is here that you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You are no longer shaped by circumstances. You begin to shape your reality from within. The people who feel uncomfortable with your absence, they reveal something powerful. They never truly wanted you. They wanted the role you played. And now that you no longer fit, they don't know what to do with you. And that is liberating. Yes, you will lose people, but you will find yourself. You will walk away from familiar places, but you will reconnect with your essence. You will be misunderstood. But finally, you will begin to be respected, because when you are no longer available for anything, you become valuable, rare, unforgettable. And don't be fooled. This is not an ending. It's a rebirth, a new beginning, the start of a life where you are no longer available for emotional crumbs, manipulative games, voids disguised as affection. Now you only accept what resonates with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. And if you've made it this far, it's because a part of you is already ready. A part of you has already understood that being loved means nothing if it requires abandoning yourself. And that true self-love only begins when you finally choose yourself, even if it costs you the comfort of company, even if it means being alone for a while. So now, tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even hated, in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being fully, unapologetically you? If this message touched you, if it made sense to your soul, write it below. I choose my peace. Let's see how many of us are truly ready for this transition. And don't forget, Keep watching the next video. It's more important than you realize. See you there.